Greetings, you're listening to Guiding Stars Evolutionary Astrology Radio. This is your host, Kristin Fontana. Guiding Stars is an interactive, soul-centered astrology talk show using the symbolic language of evolutionary astrology to enlighten and empower you on this journey. So excited we are continuing this particular journey, looking at the phase between Jupiter and Mercury, and we've reached the gibbous phase. I'm here with Deva Green, and I'd like to welcome Deva back to Guiding Stars. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And before we get going, if you are just tuning in, listening to this Guiding Stars series, we do have a website available for you to learn more about evolutionary astrology. The website is schoolofelvolutionaryastrology.com. And within the website, we do have a wonderful learning forum where you can post questions or participate in practice threads, so we welcome you there. Also, if you're interested in becoming a more serious student, we do have a correspondence course, which is a series of 27 DVDs. They're separated into 3 segments where you can become certified in EA, or Evolutionary Astrology. And this is the original course taught by the founder, Deva Green. So if you're interested in becoming certified or you just want the material, you can find out more information on the website. Anything else that I missed? Oh, and you want to maybe talk about interpreters would be good.
Yeah, thanks. Call for Translators said it's super exciting as we've had various Jeffrey Wolf Green books translated into a diversity of languages now, and any translator who would like to help the school and learn the work at the same time, please feel free to email me and we'll go from there.
All right, great. Sounds good. Yeah, all the books are being put in so many different languages at this point. It's very exciting.
Yes.
Thanks to all the interpreters that keep emailing you.
Thank you very much.
A big thanks to all of them. All right. So in evolutionary astrology, there is a very, incredible area of this work that consists of looking at the planetary position or aspect between 2 planets. We call them planetary pairs. And you can look at any 2 planets and understand how long you've been working through something in your journey, whether it's Mars and Venus, and you're looking at your relationships, the nature of the relationship dynamics you've been creating, cultivating, needing to evolve through. We're looking at Jupiter and Mercury in this instance, and this has everything to do with how you take in information, how you express yourself, how you communicate, what it is that you intuit or you think about, what is your message in this life, what is it that you want to communicate, and how are you going to articulate that message. And in essence, this is about finding your natural voice. Jupiter is a planet of natural law and how we naturally know things without knowing why we know things. So it can be about how you naturally know what it is that you want to do in your life, what you feel a natural rhythm with. And so I love this series. We've been talking a lot about different artists and musicians and people that are taking this Jupiter-Mercury phase, and we can see it expressed through these aspects in the life that they're creating for themselves. And so there's, to me, this particular area of evolutionary astrology where we're utilizing the planetary phases is just incredible and can offer so much detail when you're looking into somebody's chart. So let's look at that next slide so we can refresh our memory a little bit about this planetary phase wheel. I remember when I started studying evolutionary astrology, and I've shared this in prior webinars looking at these phases with you, Deva, but I was a little overwhelmed by all of this. Even I think it's so classic. I do have Jupiter, Mercury, Gibbous phase. I'm going to tell you guys right out of the gate. So I was overwhelmed by all the numbers and the details here, and I didn't think I'd ever be able to figure it out because there is a lot here, but there's a way to simplify things and not be too Virgo about it. We're going to be Virgo today about a lot of things, I'm sure, but with this gibbous phase. But this essentially, if you're just getting into EA, this wheel is exactly the same as looking at the zodiac from 0 to 360. And what you'll notice is that instead of 12 houses, 12 signs of the zodiac, there are 8 when we're looking at the planetary phases in this wheel. And so each piece of the pie here in the new phase is going to be Aries and a little bit of Taurus. Then we move to crescent phase, which is Taurus and some Gemini. And so you're combining these archetypes as we move around the zodiac. And with the gibbous phase, it's actually starting out with some Leo and then moving into the Virgo energy. And so that's what is going to, that's what's going to manifest with the gibbous phase. And the gibbous phase is only, it's only, how do I say this, Dave? You're going to have to help me. The aspect within the phase is, how do you, I'm having a hard time articulating this.
It's first we look at the phase to understand the context of any given specific aspect.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Exactly what I wanted to say. Okay, so we need to know what phase it's in before we get specific to the aspect. For example, there's an inconjunct, a gibbous inconjunct, but there's also a full phase inconjunct, as you can see here with the red inconjunct aspect. And in this wheel, all the red obviously is going to be an aspect of stress, the blue is going to be an aspect of support, and then the white is going to be one that's, it doesn't quite hold, I would say, as much energy, sort of this in-between phase. And most of us have a combination of all these colors, but if you're looking at the chart and you're seeing an inconjunct within a gibbous phase, that's going to represent an energy of stress, clearly. Anything that's blue, like the biquintile, the triseptile here, is going to be something more supportive. And before we move into this, I want to remind people how you figure out, or Deva, you can, how we figure out what phase our Jupiter and Mercury are in for this series.
Yeah, to configure the phase in any given aspect or any specific aspect that Jupiter or Mercury is in, you start with the slower moving planet. So in this case, we're going to be starting with Jupiter because Jupiter has a slower rotation than Mercury. And from there, we count counterclockwise. We count counterclockwise to Mercury, and we figure out the degrees of separation. So from there, we can determine what phase and what aspect Jupiter and Mercury are in. So start with Jupiter, and then count the degrees of separation moving counterclockwise until you reach Mercury.
Right. Okay, great. And so for today, anybody who has Jupiter and Mercury between 135 and 180 are going to have Jupiter and Mercury in a gibbous phase. All right, 135 to 180.
That's
now,
right.
With the gibbous phase, it doesn't matter where you are within that. And what I wanted to say, my mind got really clear after you were talking, Deva. Thank you. So it's important to first understand the phase and then plug in the exact aspect, but find the phase first, because the aspects, all aspects in all of astrology only have their meaning relative to the phases that they exist within. And as we've talked in prior shows, there's two different types of conjunctions, 4 different types of oppositions, 4 different types of squares, right? So the conjunction could be a new phase conjunction or a balsamic conjunction, as you see here at 9 o'clock on the wheel. The opposition can be, there's two different types of oppositions. We have gibbous and full phase opposition. Yeah. and then the 4 different types of squares. So we have crescent phase square, first quarter square, disseminating square, and a last quarter square. So before we kind of get into the specifics at different degrees, I'd like to talk some about Gibbous in general, like what it means to have your Jupiter Mercury in a Gibbous phase. And I think the first most important thing to think about with the Gibbous phase, as we think about so much with Virgo, is that there's a heightened awareness of everything that you are not. So there's this focus on everything that's missing or broken, and that is directly linked with this need for self-improvement, which is so typical for the Virgo, who's always in this state of trying to improve and to better themselves, right? So at the balsamic phase, it's polarity here. The balsamic phase is more Piscean. It's about completion and perfection. That which is high, it's like spirit, right? That which is whole. And so the phase, you're feeling small as a result, and it creates a feeling of imperfection versus perfection, which is seen in the polarity. Now we've had the inflated balloon from the Leonian trine, and a Leo's balloon must pop at some point. And your dad used to say, there must be a fall to the kingdom, right? As Virgo follows Leo. So then there's this crazy analysis that occurs there. And so there can be this self-created crises at the 135 degree mark and at the inconjunct. The self-doubt here can be endless, and that can lead to a paralysis, and the soul can at times never, ever feel ready. Now, I was sharing earlier that I have this aspect, and I remember also hearing about it's like the eternal student. This is another excellent example for Gibbous phase. They're always, they can be 90 in a rocking chair and still wanting to, read about this or that or improve, expand their consciousness or awareness in some way. They're never going to be done learning, growing, trying to improve, trying to get it right. And so the eternal student, for sure, no matter if you're going to school or just schooling yourself and trying to explore different ways to become more whole. Understand your way in the world, your place in the world. And so that is just the energy that it carries. And I do love in general, as I've talked about, it's interesting, just did a show with Ari and with Simon with Saturn and Virgo, and Ari with Chiron and Virgo, and here we sit in Gibbous phase. It's amazing how this timing is working out along these lines. But I really do love the natural humility that comes with this archetype, because with Leo there might be a need for all of the attention or the light to be shining on them, or even an expectation. And with Virgo, it's a complete opposite of that. They don't want the light shining on them. In fact, if anything, it's just going to be this paranoia about not being perfect or not being enough or not being ready. And it reminds me too of this, if for anybody that's preparing, it would be an example would be somebody who's preparing for a show, and they practice. That's what they need to do. If they're a dancer or they're a pianist, and they're just practicing their pieces over and over and over again, and they need to do that to feel ready, right? To feel prepared, versus somebody springing something on them, like say, show me this dance right now in front of everybody. It would absolutely freeze in horror without any preparation, without any time to think about it. And so I definitely feel the evolution of that, would be to allow a surrender to take place, saying, hey, I already know all this. I know this dance. I know this piece.
Right.
I can do it. So it's like telling yourself mentally, all of this is already in me. I don't need to practice it 20 more times. And
Right,
so
because some
too,
of that guilt that may be carried or some of that procrastination may be linked with memories where the soul has been trying to communicate a message but wasn't able to do so because of this paralysis. So
exactly,
part of what you're sharing or what you're communicating, especially relative to the balsamic polarity, is for the soul to say, it's time, it's ready, I've learned my steps, and I just need to allow myself and surrender to the message that wants to come through.
exactly. A long time ago, gosh, I don't know whatever happened to this band, the Dixie Chicks, but they used to have a song, and then I don't know if this is the title of the song, but the lyrics say, "When the train goes by, I'm going to be ready this time."
Oh,
And we've talked about this so many times about the train stopping, the doors opening, you're standing on the platform. But are you going to get in? You know, are you going to get
right.
in this time?
I will this
So,
time.
and that's what they sing when the train goes by. I'm going to be ready this time. And
Yeah,
whoever wrote that song is going to have a strong sixth house or Jupiter, Mercury, Venus
absolutely.
phase for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so the other thing about souls with gibbous phase, Jupiter, Mercury, can be masters at excuse making.
Mm-hmm.
Even though all of their excuses could sound perfectly rational, uh, they're going to have a whole list of why they can't do something or why they're not ready or what have you. So, and part of this too is that the soul is preparing to integrate into social reality as an equal among people, which we see in the full phase. And so there's this fear of, again, being able to integrate
Right.
and needing to prepare just to. It is literally about being backstage in a way, preparing for a show. But the show is bringing yourself out into the world amongst the people. And so, there can be all sorts of good reasons why someone's not ready to write the book or to run the race or to perform that dance or whatever it is. But ultimately, it's about just doing it, like the Nike ad, just getting your shoes
Right.
on and going. Just don't even think about it anymore. Just stop thinking about it and just do it. So that's the healing and the resolution for that energy when it becomes so when there's so much analysis that creates the freeze, the famous freeze where you
Mm-hmm.
can't move. So just put yourself in motion here. What else? Anything else I'm missing for the gibbous?
I would say that's, very right. Emotionally, to me, that really, captures the experience of Gibbous and Virgo and sixth house, and that within that there is that feeling of wanting to make sure that like an adjustment, or sometimes depending on the different aspects of the chart, but that the soul may come in carrying carrying a degree of guilt around wanting to communicate a message in a way that doesn't evoke criticism from others, or it's almost like a feeling of, at times, the soul may be criticizing itself because of a way that it has communicated, and that sparked a sense of criticism or even persecution. And so it's like the soul is wanting to, there's twofold. It's wanting, as you were saying, to adjust, or to make sure that all the adjustments are made to prepare as an equal, and also at the same time, perhaps uh, put itself out there regardless of the criticism at times. Part of the
Yeah,
Gibbous
definitely.
phase can be saying, you know what, I know that I've absolutely practiced my steps. I've done this backstage now buku times, and I know that it's ready. I know that I'm ready, and I know that whatever criticism may come. So in a way, part of the Gibbous phase is preparing to accept whatever criticism comes from the message, because knowing of the time that it's been there being perfected. So,
Right.
um,
I agree. And there can be a necessary humiliation, like you said, just all of necessary to just, take whatever comes at you and not attach to it, right?
right.
Just to accept that that's going to happen as you put yourself out there more in the world, that will occur.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the feeling of never being ready to do what original purpose dictates for you to become. You know, all of a sudden, when you're at that first quarter trine, and you're feeling full of yourself,
Right.
back there at the first quarter trine, it's replaced with this, maybe I'm not ready or cut out for this, or I'm not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually like, who do I think I am? That I'm gonna
Right.
and then you have to ask the client, well, who determines what perfection is?
Right.
We're all in a state of becoming. Nobody's perfect, and perfection is in the process. So, you know, if any of you have the planetary pairs here, and I think that Jupiter-Mercury is really tough because Mercury naturally rules Virgo, and it's all about the mind and what you tell yourself. But you know what I'm talking about if you have this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're thinking, girl, you don't want to be in my head, right?
Right.
In my head. That's what they're saying. But the real healing here is through service. That
Right.
whoever's got Jupiter, Mercury in this position, that you give deeper meaning to the nature of your purpose through the service to the whole, through some form of service that you bring to the whole. It's linking purpose to service to the whole. And then you're like, oh, well, I'm doing it for others, or I'm being of service. And by being of service and bringing all that I have, then it doesn't create these kinks or this paralysis, because I'm just humbly giving what I can to make this world better than the way that I found it. That is when the healing happens there, because you're bringing all that you are and all that God made you to be in the best way that you know how. To be of service is ultimately, for these people, when they leave this life, if they felt that they've been of service, they will feel whole. They will feel that they've done enough. It is a big part of that gibbous phase. So selflessly, to give selflessly. All right. Those are my last thoughts on the gibbous, unless you have any other ones. Green. I think we've covered them well.
Well, it's about what I have with the gibbous phase.
Okay. Let me just see here. Yeah, I just had some notes here. We can go into this next chart in a second, but I was just, when we're going to talk about the different phases within the gibbous through some chart examples, but obviously toward the end you will, or even within that gibbous phase, you will you're beginning here to disseminate your social purpose. You know, you're sticking your toe in the water a bit. And the original impulse of individuality and willful subjective development, which was set in motion back at the new phase, is now needing to be integrated, or your ego is needed to be integrated into the social sphere, as we've talked about, as an equal, but with a work function, right? A specific work function, which is a service piece.
Right.
So as you get closer to the end of this phase, you're going to have to learn to listen what others are telling you that they need. And by listening to what others need, then you're able to be of better service, bringing the gifts, the inherent gifts that you have, what it is that how you want to utilize your voice, your message, your hands, if you're using your hands in your work, body work or writing or whatever it might be. So as we get deeper in the phase, that occurs. All right, just a few more tidbits. We can move to the next slide, and we'll use our first example here. And who would have thought our first example is going to be John Lennon? I mean, people would not imagine, right?
Right.
That he would have a gibbous phase, and it's an opposition, even a gibbous opposition, with as famous as he was and still is, even in his death, to have that self-doubt, to be plagued with self-doubt, or definitely, you've got a story to tell, I know, on his chart, plenty of history here, but it's, again, always questioning yourself and whatever it is that you do. And so being a writer, right, and a singer, and having this gibbous phase, and there's a lot that the world didn't know about him, or didn't see about him. A lot of stuff that he helped hidden, even with Venus and Virgo in the 5th, and all those planets in the 6th. My goodness. So let's talk about this phase, Deva.
Because it's a gibbous phase opposition.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a very, I mean, to me, this is a very powerful aspect, because an opposition symbolizes the evolutionary intention to throw something off. And in the gibbous phase, it can manifest as these cycles to where the person is taking in the voices of others, taking in perhaps criticism, in a sense, almost taking it in like a doormat, like, okay, okay, okay. And then suddenly the other cycle starts in terms of the opposition needing to throw something off, and then the soul will attempt to assert its own voice, or will attempt to maybe stand up for itself against criticism that through reflection is felt unwanted or is not fair. But there's this cycle of taking in, and then that soul's attempt to bring it out, first steps to bring it out into society in a way. And with him, he had Mercury and Scorpio in the 7th. So in terms of communicating a message to others, but it's throwing something off. It's that need to listen to others in order to understand what's needed, in order to be of greater service, and so on. So again, it creates these cycles of withdrawal, and then bringing forward again in order to throw off those extremes that can happen. We're looking at Jupiter being in Taurus in the 1st and Mercury in the 7th. So looking at this, specifically seeing how this aspect could manifest, it was perhaps throwing off messages that he was receiving from others when he felt that they weren't reflective of his values, or when he felt it wasn't fair, because we're looking in the 7th house. So it's like these cycles of withdrawal and kind of coming back or springing back, and also making adjustments, seeing that it's in the gibbous phase, that at times perhaps when he felt that his communication was a bit too scorpionic, seeing and seeing that it may have, not been able to be something that the other was able to receive, being able to take that in. So trying to create more of a balanced approach instead of the extremes. Again, being able to throw something off, and he was a very powerful communicator through his words. I mean, the song "Imagine." I mean, so many timeless lyrics that, so many timeless words that he had that just penetrate, to me, right to the, core of what it is to, feel this desire to grow, or to feel this connection to something to higher than oneself. That's also the gibbous phase at the same time, and seeing this Mercury in Scorpio. And, I would say, too, that a lot of his communication was about throwing off that dynamic of perfection and imperfection, seeing Venus being in Virgo, seeing South Node in the 12th. And in a sense, he was communicating, that all we can really do at times is bring forward our best messages to others, or all we can really do is show up at our best. Seeing this Jupiter being in Taurus in the 1st house, bringing forward what our natural values are, and deeply giving to others. I mean, seeing the Mercury in Scorpio in the 7th, it's almost saying, it's when also seeing the South Node in the 1st, or seeing South Node in Aries, you can feel his own transition from perhaps at times in his earlier life being a bit of a taker, or being somebody who was a bit more on the, here are my needs, and becoming more somebody who's defined through giving, the North Node being in Libra in the 6th. So it's almost like saying, the act of giving is the beauty in and of itself.
Mhm.
And in that way, creating an adjustment or creating an ability to communicate messages specifically with others in relationships, and also within the social realm, around what values equality
Right.
and
Absolutely. Yeah, he's speaking for sure to the underdog, or he's speaking or singing to help promote or support more equality. So it would
yeah.
be, imagine all the people. I mean, you're imagining all the people that don't have what others have, and so he's like tapping into this collective current of energy. But it's
Mm,
really feel, and through his music, he's able uh, to activate or to access the vision or the just imagination of how it could be if, we all looked out for one another. We lived in a world where there was more peace or more love. So he's trying to elevate what feels so, and fix what feels so broken, right? What feels
yeah.
so unequal and unbalanced. And that's how that gibbous phase operates too, because of so much suffering or so much sadness. And so that's his need and desire through his lyrics and through his music to try and restore more balance, because music is a universal language. It's what connects us all and binds us all. Everybody has in varying degrees the same kind of experience when they listen to music. It has a cathartic effect, right, on the soul, really. I mean, you can see here too his south node being in the 12th in Aries, and that ruler Mars is conjunct Neptune in Virgo. Again, trying this whole theme of equality and fairness and justice and helping others, kind of it's restated all over the chart. So
Mm-hmm.
that was a great example. Did he write Imagine himself? Was that his?
99% sure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That was one of their biggest. All right. Any last thoughts on him? I know we have a few other charts here.
I would say too, specifically to how once he gained, seeing the other dynamics of the chart and kind of pulling that together, perhaps part of the gibbous phase too was the way that he used his fame in this life was very much, as you were saying, about wanting to help the underdogs, wanting to promote a vision, that could last regardless of the amount of time the music was actually being played, seeing the south node in the 12th. So it was like perhaps too a lesson about personal fame, seeing Pluto in Leo, south node in Aries. But it was like the gibbous phase, the way that he was using his recognition was also very much in alignment or showing, reflecting this healing process that he was initiating, and uh, that reflecting those principles of equality, justice, fair play, and everybody looking out for each other.
Yeah, and you can see the flip side of that energy too. I mean, of course, there's a light and a shadow to everything, and because of him being in the limelight, and because of his fame, he was a target, right? And he was
Right.
killed. So that south node in Aries is Mars and Libra conjunct that Neptune in Virgo. So it ended his life at the same time. So he's almost like his sent as a self-sacrifice, in a sense, putting himself. It goes far beyond being criticized for something. He literally got a bullet,
Right.
for it. So, I mean, that's taking that gibbous to extreme. But
To
that,
extremes.
yeah, and that extreme is part of the gibbous. This is a gibbous opposition. So, and you can see how that energy, and you take the song Imagine, and then you look at how his life ended, and you can't see two more extreme energies, right?
Right.
So, world peace versus the end of your life.
Right.
In that moon in Aquarius squaring his Mercury is, you know, that sudden ending, that sudden end of his life there.
Mm.
So, all right, that was excellent. Let's move to the next chart. Nostradamus. All right, I'll let you take this one. It's a great one. Look at all those retrogrades.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, this is in terms of the gibbous phase. To me, this is a really, you know, good example of how the gibbous phase can manifest as somebody who's being ahead of their time, and that they're known that the body of their work, or the in his case, because we're talking about gibbous and we're talking about Virgo, and he has South Node in Virgo in the 6th, precise. How precise and how accurate his work ended up being, and that took time, or that took the process of putting himself out there regardless of the criticism, regardless of the rejection. It was that what you were saying, putting something into motion, and looking at the South Node in the 6th, North Node in the 12th, kind of that surrender to a higher source. Like, you know, I'll just surrender myself and keep putting myself out there, because I can see the bigger effects that this could have, or I could see that you know, that this could be beneficial to others. This could be a form of healing and service and so on. And in his chart, he has he has Jupiter in Cancer in the 4th house retrograde, and also Mercury retrograde in an opposition, another gibbous opposition in Capricorn in the 10th. So to me, looking at that, it was throwing off his own perhaps emotional insecurities in regards to what external authority was telling him was acceptable and non-acceptable. I mean, the way that he started out in his early life is he wanted to be a physician. He wanted to practice medicine, South Node in the 6th, and yet he refused to conform to conventional practices, which I can see as the Mercury being retrograde, and also the Jupiter retrograde, and Saturn and Mars.
Saturn and Mars.
No, he would not bleed people with leeches, because it was proven to be inhumane and ultimately not very effective. So he, you know, advocated different ways that were against the norm. And looking at the Jupiter Cancer in the 4th, and Mercury and Capricorn in the 10th, both retrograde, in a sense, and his practices were known to be effective over time. They started assimilating the way that he was practicing medicine over time too. So it was, you know, it's like this throwing off his own insecurities around putting forward things that were against the norm. And I would say too, personally, that he was able to help victims of the plague through very simple things, sometimes fresh air, vitamin C. So he came up with these real simple remedies, right? And again, you know, were at first perceived as radical, but only because it was ahead of the time, Mercury in Capricorn. And emotionally speaking, part of something that he was trying to throw off was also, I mean, this was that he was able to heal some patients who were sick, but he was unable to save his family, his children, and his wife. So it's like this real gibbous experience of, you know,
I did not know that.
Oh, I mean, you know, it was, so there were just these varying factors that kind of kept triggering that gibbous feeling, or that feeling of lack of self-doubt, of, you know, maybe I'm not good enough. And in regards to his own self-image, and seeing the retrogrades too, how you know, a majority of the time, again, he was just seen as too revolutionary. He has Venus in Aquarius in the 11th. But it was over the stretch of time that his prophecies he practiced astrology as well. And it was over the course of time that he was that his predictions, or that he was able to be seen, or his work was seen as something that was more there to serve humanity rather than being something that was, you know, either dark or heretical, or, you know, something that was to instill a fear in others. It was more seen as something that was trying to help the collective, or trying to help humanity in terms of averting certain crises.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the gibbous phase, it's kind of seeing that sense of, you know, just do it, just go for it, just keep putting himself out there, and also perhaps at times being discerning around who to impart this wisdom to, or who to share this communication with and not. That could be part of the retrogrades, that especially with South Node in the 6th, is that at other times he may have you know, out of a desire to serve, he may have shared information with those who he shouldn't have. I mean, that could be part of it too, is you know, being very discerning about who you share the communications with.
Right, or learning that.
Learning that.
Learning discernment and boundaries.
Exactly.
That's a perfect example of Jupiter Mercury. All right, excellent. Let's move to the next chart. Jane Goodall, JG. All right, another wonderful example here. And what is the exact aspect within the phase here?
In conjunct?
It is an exact in conjunct. Yeah, 3 degrees we use for the orb here. It is a gibbous phase in conjunct. And of course, she was highly criticized for not going through a formal education and the ivory tower approach to things, right? You know, compared to the to men in her field who had traveled further in school or gotten certain degrees, right?
Right.
So go ahead and let's talk about her gibbous phase here. Of course, she's got Jupiter in the 10th house. She's had incredible success in her work, but yeah, international.
Right. I would say with the oppositions that we were looking at in the previous examples, that was more about throwing something off, and that feeling of, you know, sorting out fair criticism and not fair criticism perhaps, and the adjustment into the social world. And that when we have the inconjunct, it creates like a real, I would say, sharp focus on kind of staying aligned with the intent, or staying aligned with the form of service that soul is then meant to carry forward relative to the gibbous phase. So it can create a crisis if the person is, you know, either tempted to stray. Let's say, for example, in this case, when that crisis hit in regards to her work being accepted or not accepted, looking at Jupiter and Libra retrograde in the 10th, and then Mercury and Pisces in the 3rd, you know, not wanting to speculate, but she may have had a self-doubt around, do I go ahead and adjust what I'm writing in order to fit their to fit their expectations and to become published, or because they were wanting her to use language that was other than her original writings. And so she may have gone through a feeling of, do I need to adjust in order to bring the work forward? Do I need to go ahead and adjust to their expectations to make this in a quote-unquote publishable form? Or do I, you know, do I stay very firm on what my actual observations have been here in Africa?
Well, of course, is what she did.
Yeah, which
look at all her retrogrades too. Pluto retrograde, Neptune retrograde, Jupiter retrograde. And then all that Aquarius, Saturn and Venus and Aquarius on the North Node. So yeah, she was definitely not wanting to conform to just because they wanted a certain way.
Right.
Stick to her guns for sure with that Sun Mars in Aries. She did.
Exactly. And I mean, you know, that created the resolution, or to me that the inconjunction, you know, came through, or you can see that in her being able to communicate to them too, that, you know, these are direct findings, these are direct observations. This isn't something that, you know, I'm you know, learning about in a book, or that I'm there in a classroom reading about. This is something that's coming through actual direct observation. So there was like a way of, like you were saying, you know, by sticking to her guns, there was a way of communicating that to where it helped resolve as much as possible that tension that when she was becoming established. So there
That's
was a,
because, yeah, the teachings live and they lie in nature. And with her
yeah.
Jupiter and Libra retrograde, she was going to teach, and she was also going to learn, you know, through nature, and not studying some book somewhere and some, like I said, some ivory tower. So she was going to observe, she was going to learn, she was going to gain this information, you know, and in a retrograde way, which is just going back to the roots, going back to
Mm-hmm.
the natural way of learning, of understanding things, which is living with these animals, right? And so also with Mercury and Pisces in the third house, I mean, that is so, that is about being in a realm that is limitless, timeless, boundless, seamless, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
to in conjunct, and when I think of nature, I do think of Sagittarius and Virgo, and then you put this gibbous Mercury in a gibbous phase, and that's where she's learning. That's where she's going to be able to take what she's observed and teach it, and then teach it through that retrograde, Jupiter retrograde in the 10th house. I love it. And so she did. She challenged conformity here, and she did some ground. And she's still alive, I believe, right in her 90s, still traveling. But she did some incredibly groundbreaking work in her time. So, all right, excellent. One more chart here. Sarah McLaughlin, yes. All right, Jupiter rules her chart with the Sag rising. I feel like we had another Sag rising here earlier. Was that Nostradamus? But all right, so Jupiter is the ruler for the chart and is in Virgo, another Virgo retrograde, in conjunct Mercury, and not in conjunct, it's a gibbous phase. Gibbous, that's a wide opposition. There's not an exact aspect here. This is one of those examples, but it probably felt like an opposition in her
Yeah.
life. Or feels like it, I should say. All right, go ahead and take this one.
Oh, with Sarah McLaughlin, yeah, looking at Jupiter being in Virgo retrograde in the 9th house, and Mercury in Aquarius in the 2nd. There's her form of service, or her feeling of the best way that she can serve is through really speaking to the power of liberation, seeing Mercury in Aquarius, through being able to essentially, I mean, Virgo does have a feeling, even though it's a bit of a Scorpio feeling too, but Virgo can have a very intense laser of its own to almost in a way strip you bare to the bone. And everything that you feel that's not right, everything that you feel is not lacking. I mean, Jupiter in Virgo in the 9th can be quite acute at being able to purge or to rid itself of any beliefs that no longer are serving. So it's like ridding itself of anything that feels that it's not connected to natural truths, natural laws, its natural voice, and using that as a way for liberation. Mercury being in Aquarius, I mean, I feel a lot in her music that she has busted herself through a lot of difficult experiences and is kind of singing about getting to the other side. It can be very liberating, but it doesn't happen until you go through that process of stripping yourself absolutely bare.
Yeah, she writes about a lot of painful things, heartbreak, and hold on, this is going to hurt like hell, kind of.
Yeah.
Hold on to yourself, this is going to hurt like hell. And that is, I mean, it's just, she talks about the pain, but she is so empowering in her,
Right.
whether it's the music, and it's, even though, yes, this is going to happen, there's always this rising above it somehow, you know, through that's her Mars and Pisces in the third house, this ability to, you know, find a way through or to heal whatever you have endured. So I find and found her, at least her original music, so healing and empowering at the same time. And I think, you know, there's so much about that gibbous phase, Jupiter, Mercury, gibbous phase, that allows other people, you become very relatable, because people feel like, wow, she knows how it feels. She really knows how it feels. So I can really relate to her. And the trauma, unresolved trauma, is connected to Aquarius. And here she's talking about things of a traumatic, or singing about things of a traumatic nature. And I've shared about her chart before. I know she went to live in the woods for 6 months while she wrote her first big breakout CD, Fumbling Towards Ecstasy, and just being, you know, naked and raw emotionally out there with the animals, with the insects, with, you know, Mother Nature, getting real and raw, you know, not having anybody tending to her needs. It's just you alone with you, and then being able to write from that place. And so, that Jupiter in Virgo in the ninth retrograde was a powerful way to unlock those doors, and trining her Venus in Capricorn to be able to speak to it and to write about it.
Right, and Mercury being in Aquarius in the second, it's always like this feeling of, you know, you already have what you need within to make that transformation. Look inside, like you have it. You've got the resources, you've got the tools, you can make that breakthrough. You know, there's just this Mercury in Aquarius, and in terms of Jupiter being in the ninth, of finding that within yourself, finding that in seclusion, out in nature and the natural elements. So it's a really strong tool in terms of that second house is going to value that feeling of finding that from within yourself, or not coming specifically through another person, with that coming through a natural connection, you know, to nature and so on.
Gosh, I just noticed this. She's got Moon in Capricorn squaring the nodes. And of course, a big part of her journey had been about empower. Well, she empowers men and women through her music, but the Lilith Fair that she, that music tour that she started and created with other women, was to raise money for battered women. And you can see here this empowering women energy with the North Node in Aries in the fourth with Saturn. She's got Moon square the nodes in Capricorn, which that Saturn rules. That's kind of going beyond this Jupiter Mercury gibbous phase here. But of course, her music, though, is speaking to an underdog, somebody who's suffered in some way, whether it's, you know, a child being abused or a woman being battered, you know, and she really targeted that part of the population to try and help raise money to support centers for women who can get back on their feet again. So sure, in other lifetimes, who knows, in this lifetime, the only story I do know is I think she was engaged to somebody who was lost at sea on a fishing trip, I believe. I think she was engaged to him, and he was, I don't know, lost in the Bermuda Triangle or something, never saw him again. He just disappeared. So that obviously you can see with the Moon in the second house, kind of feeling left emotionally, literally alone. So she can write about these painful traumas, this sudden loss, this tragic trauma through that gibbous phase Jupiter Mercury. So good example as well. All right, any last thoughts on Sarah before we close the show?
No, I would say too that in terms of, the gibbous, that at times she did have to counteract some criticism that she felt was unwanted, because I think there was some criticism around being feminist or so on, and she really, spoke. She said, no, my music is geared towards just what you were sharing, that it's for the underdogs, it's for those who have suffered and who are trying to get back on their feet and so on. So you can see kind of how that gibbous phase was operating in that context too, of making sure that her message, was not portrayed as something it wasn't.
A big part of, obviously, she's speaking to just that emotional pain that exists with anyone who's been through something traumatic. And of course, it's not gender related. It's a universal experience in relative degrees. And so speaking to that emotional pain, which of course you can, and the symbol for the moon or fourth house is not just woman, it's emotion, it's yin, it's our inner home. And it's literally like helping you put the pieces back together again through her music. All those broken pieces, I think of gibbous phase. All those broken pieces, how are we going to put these back together again and allow yourself to feel more whole and stronger for the journey. So, incredible musician, artist, songwriter, and a great example for the gibbous phase here. Thank you. Well, I've seen a lot of retrograde planets in all these charts. We like to see that. All right. Well, thank you so much for this time today. If those of you are interested in getting a reading with Deva, you can see her website there. And we're going to continue our journey and look at Jupiter, Mercury full phase next time. It'll be, just check our announcements. I don't have the exact date on me or with me right in the moment, but we're doing some Guiding Stars series with Simon, Ari, and Rose Marcus. Still doing that through healthylife.net, but we'll be back next week with her. So I look forward to continuing our journey, Deva.
Me too.
Actually, I am going to find this if I can. I think it's July 27th. That will be our next Zoom meeting with full phase Jupiter Mercury. Yeah. Okay. Thanks again. And we'll be back next week with Rose Marcus and continue on with these other series with Ari and Simon. And we'll be back with Deva the end of July. Until next time, namaste.